The Cardinals spent weeks struggling to figure out a number 5 starter, and then Andre Pallante came along. We'll talk Palante's big start from Wednesday as the Cardinals win their 5th straight series and whether he can sustain it moving forward. Coming up on B-Shape Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Shape Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you. It is the evening hours of Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. As this afternoon, the Cardinals took the series against the Reds 5-3 at Great American Ballpark. Game 3 going the Cardinals' direction, and it's Andre Pallante who steps into the number 5 spot in the rotation and throws a gem. 6 shutout innings, pacing the Cardinals in this one. A really interesting latter portion of this game as well, as the Cardinal bullpen was not perfect. It had some bumps and bruises in this game, but for the Cardinal offense to be able to continue to pile on scoring runs in the 8th and 9th to sort of counteract some of the struggles that the bullpen was having in this game, really complete win for the Cardinals, and I think that's the second day in a row where we've said just all the different elements working together. Sometimes everybody's got their A game and you win 7-1, like the Cardinals did on Tuesday. Sometimes not everybody has their A game, but the parts that do pick up the parts that don't. And that's exactly what we saw from the Cardinals on Wednesday. 5-3 win over the Reds. And wouldn't you know it, the Cardinals are now back into a 500 record, 1/3 of the way through the 2024 season. 27 wins, 27 losses, exactly at 500, and now tied for second place in the NL Central as the Cubs lost today to the Brewers. Yeah, their gambit to move Shohei Ohtani back out of the Cardinals series and into this Brewers series did not pan out for them as he was hit around a bit. And so the Cardinals are tied for second in the division just like that. Welcome into B-Shape Daily. Appreciate you guys for joining as always. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, the red and white subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your video screen. If you're the type of Cardinals fan that wants to hear talk about this team on a daily basis, well, lucky for you, that's exactly what we're bringing here on the Brenden Schaeffer St. Louis Cardinals writer YouTube channel and the podcast B-Shape Daily, which can also be found on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Tonight on the show, we'll touch on as many topics as I can get to from Wednesday afternoon's Cardinal win, including Andre Pallante's outing. Look, he's a name that I've been mentioning on the show for a number of weeks at this point, it feels like, as the Cardinals kept circling the drain, trying to figure out what the heck to do with that rotation spot that had been vacated by Steven Matz and his injury. They tried to give it to Matthew Liberatore on the fly. I don't think that was very well thought out, as he wasn't built up for a starter's workload. He had been thriving in the bullpen. I understood when they did it because I thought, man, this is a 24-year-old kid that's still looking to find his way in the big leagues, and if he can turn out to be a dynamite starter, then that's what you want as the St. Louis Cardinals. But now that we've seen it play out, I just don't think it was a fair position to put him in, and it really was destined to fail from the very beginning. And that's what it did. Matthew Liberatore is going to be back in the bullpen now. But how about Andre Pallante? The outing that he had today, we'll talk about his start. We'll talk about how he got here in the first place. Some really interesting news and tidbits to come out of his post-game interview that was shown on Bally Sports Midwest. Play a little audio from that perhaps as well today. And we'll ask the question, can it be sustained? What Andre Pallante did this afternoon in Cincinnati, can he do it moving forward? That's going to be an important question for the Cardinals, as they would love nothing more than to have that number 5 slot in the rotation accounted for, at least until Steven Matz returns, and then you can figure out what you want to do from there. We'll talk about something that's maybe not so pleasant, couple of somethings that I think cause for concern potentially. One is an injury. Lars Nootbaar left in the middle of this game with an injury, evidently, and we'll talk about a little bit more detail on what that might include and what the severity could be. Something to keep an eye on there. And we'll also talk Ryan Helsley, who struggled again in this outing on Wednesday. And I say again because it was an interesting weekend for him against the Cubs, where he was giving up hits, dealing with danger, didn't ultimately blow the save. And the same was true this afternoon. But something's not quite right with Ryan Helsley right now, it seems. And we'll talk about maybe more about what that is and what we think of it. All coming up on this edition of B-Shape Daily. So thank you guys for joining me. Make sure to, if you're interested in joining the channel as a member on YouTube, we've got 15 members already. I swear to you, I will get this Discord up and running here pretty soon, where there will be a private group chat for members on the YouTube channel. But for now, just lots of perks on YouTube. So check out the link in the bottom of the description to this video if that's something you might be interested in. Some extra perks for supporting the work I'm doing on this channel and supporting generally my career as we continue to advance this podcast, advance this YouTube channel, and the content that we put here. So thank you guys for doing that, for considering that. But let's go ahead and jump in now on Andre Pallante. Because, again, I think he is somebody that if you had said a number of weeks ago, hey, Andre Pallante is going to be your best option as the number 5 starter, after they try this Liberatore thing, it's not going to work out. Steven Matz is going to have a setback, so he's going to be out for longer than they initially had hoped. And it's going to be Andre Pallante. I think he would have been a little bit concerned about why in the world the Cardinals were making that decision. But let's take you back to the origin of Palante going down to Memphis and then how it came to be that he was going to join the Memphis rotation or at least strengthen out, stretch out to become a starting pitcher. And that was something that we maybe didn't have as much of an idea of until today when Andre Pallante spoke postgame and basically said that it was Ollie Marmol who asked him, hey, what do you want to do? And Palante was honest with him. It was a situation where Palante was going to be optioned to AAA. We know the numbers. He struggled early on in the season with the Cardinals out of the bullpen, had a 6.30 ERA in 10 innings pitched. It wasn't going well. He was getting absolutely blasted by right-handed batters in particular, which we'll get into that element of it because I think that's an important consideration when determining whether or not Palante is going to be successful long-term in a starter role. Even though he's a right-handed pitcher, it's interesting. It's kind of the exact same situation we saw with Liberatore when he was in the rotation, just getting completely shellacked by right-handed batters, and that made him less viable in terms of being a rotation arm that can throw 5 innings, 6 innings, get you through the lineup multiple times. It just was not viable for Liberatore at this point because of the work he was doing against right-handed hitting, which just wasn't very strong. But it was sure interesting to hear Palante after he goes 6 innings, gives up 3 hits, no runs, did allow 3 walks, and I told you he would. Didn't I tell you that he would in a recent episode when I said, hey, I think it's going to be Palante. He's going to walk guys. He's done it in Memphis as he's been stretched out as a starter. Had a 2.20 ERA in Memphis in 16 1/3 innings across 3 starts, 4 total appearances. He basically piggybacked with Zach Thompson the first time he pitched, so technically it wasn't a start, but I think it was like a 4-inning outing. So basically 4 innings per outing by Andre Pallante, walked 13 batters in 16 1/3 innings. So he was not resolving those woes, but the Cardinals called him up anyway because he was limiting runs against him and basically providing what I said, hey, the 5th starter just needs to be a guy that can get you through 5 innings. Maybe he gives up 3 runs, maybe he gives up 4 runs, but he puts you in a position to win a game, and he doesn't kill the bullpen by having a short 2-inning, 3-inning start like they were seeing from Liberatore. Granted, that was under the circumstances of him not being stretched out to start, which is why when the Cardinals were prepared to option Andre Pallante, Ollie Marmol asked him a question, and he said, yeah, I want to stretch out. If you're sending me to Memphis, it might as well be a productive moment in my season, in my career, and I'm going to try and stretch out and address some of the issues that I've been having against right-handed pitching as a result. Here was Andre Pallante talking about how that came to be, this audio courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest.
It's definitely what I was hoping for. When I got sent down at the beginning of this year, part of the conversation that Ollie and I had was about, we're going to option you. What do you want to do when you're down there? Do you want to keep strengthening out? Is that going to help you improve, or do you want to do more shorter stints and get that feeling? And I told him honestly, I've always felt of myself as a starter, and the more pitches I throw, the better I get. And I felt like while I was down there, I was able to really improve that second fastball that I was throwing. And I felt like I got a lot of good results on it today, going up and into righties. And I just feel like today was a pretty good day. I felt like I was me on the mound.
So did you catch that from Cardinals starter Andre Pallante? Basically saying, Ollie asked him point blank, look, we are going to option you, but what would you prefer to do down there in Memphis? What do you want to get out of it? Do you want to stay in these shorter bursts, which is the way that we've used you in the big leagues, but you weren't successful this time? So do you want to sharpen up in those areas, try to figure out how to get back to where you can be successful, and maybe they get you back here sooner than later, back in the bullpen? Or do you want to go a little bit of a different direction? Do you want to strengthen up, stretch out, potentially work as a starter where you can throw multiple innings And maybe that at least serves a multi-inning relief role. Like you could be the long relief guy when you get back to St. Louis. Maybe there's a starter opening that comes up, but doesn't seem very likely. Like this is just, I'm paraphrasing the thought analysis of what Ollie Marmol could have been saying in those moments. This is obviously not the quote you just heard from Palante, but kind of expounding upon that. It's interesting. The route that he chose was, I want to be a starter. I've always felt that I was. I've thought of myself that way. And Andre Pallante says, I've been the type that gets better as I go along in a game. The more pitches I throw, the better I get. And that is actually 100% right, in my opinion. I think Andre Pallante and his skill set actually is better suited to start than it is to be out of the bullpen. And it's the same conversation. The reason why is the same thing I've been saying since last year when it comes to Andre Pallante, and the difficulty a guy like him is going to have when the role he's in is as that utility sort of fireman, put out the fire because there's multiple guys on base and you need to come in and get a ground ball and get a double play. There is utility to that role, and at the beginning of the year, back in spring training, I thought Palante could have a spot in this bullpen to be used in that role. It's basically the role that he had for a good chunk of last season. At times, he was successful in it. Other times last year, we really saw him struggle because it just seemed like the BABIP was eating him alive. Batting average on balls in play. If you're a pitch-to-contact pitcher and you have a high BABIP, which basically tends to measure luck in many ways, how often does a ball that's hit against you, fly ball, ground ball, line drive, doesn't matter, pop up? How often does a batted ball go for a hit? That's your BABIP. Your batting average on balls in play. Or rather, the BABIP of the batters that are batting against you as a pitcher. And looking at the numbers, they weren't crazy drastic. He had a 313 BABIP against him in 2022 when he worked as a starter part-time, as a reliever part-time, and had a sub-4 ERA. I mean, his ERA in 2022 was, let me check this for you, 3.17 when he came up as a 23-year-old. He started 10 games. He pitched out of the bullpen 37 times. He was really good for the Cardinals as that guy that, wasn't going to strike out a ton, but was going to get you some double plays, was going to get the ground ball when you needed it, and then it was up to the defense behind him to make good on those grounders. 2022, 313 batting average on balls in play. And a league average BABIP is typically around 300. So for him to be allowing more than that suggests that he tends to allow more hits on balls in play than the standard as a baseline. But you'd like to think that over the course of time, your luck gets a little better. That could come down. Now, look, if you're getting absolutely battered and you're getting hit hard all over the yard, that's going to turn into obviously more hits. And I would imagine, I'm not going to look this data up, but I would figure that ground balls would have a higher BABIP, a higher batting average on balls in play, because fly balls are usually going to be caught. Ground balls can sneak through. It's exit velocity. There's going to be a lot of elements to that are going to be relevant to whether or not you have a high batting average on balls in play based on the batted ball data. Like fly balls, you can hit home runs on fly balls if you hit it hard enough and far enough, but otherwise it's probably getting caught because it's in the air for the longest and it's easiest for the hitter the fielder to track down. Whereas ground balls, anybody's guess whether or not a fielder is going to be standing there or make the play that's close at first base and it's ruled a hit instead of an error, like that sort of stuff. So ground ball pitchers, it stands to reason that Palante would have a little bit higher BABIP than the norm. It got even worse, though, in 2023, up to a 320 batting average on balls in play, so raised 7 points. And then earlier this season, he was getting absolutely feasted upon by the BABIP luck, the batting average on balls in play. 351 opposing BABIP against him, 31 points higher than it was in a 2023 season that did not go well for him. And even more so, 38 points higher than we saw against him in 2022 when he was actually pretty good. Batting average against went from 274 to 286 to earlier this year it was 318. Just absolutely getting crushed by bad luck in part, but also you can figure, okay, bad fielding is going to impact a guy like Palante. And we know that the Cardinals' fielding got worse in 2023. And now, we like to think it's better now, but we have been seeing some errors, maybe more than you'd like to see. But 2022, really good fielding team defensively. 2023, they took a step back. 2024, I think they've leveled it out a little bit. and you'd think a guy like Palante could be successful, but he was just getting burned, and it felt like just cruel at times. Some of the ground balls, he'd come in, there'd be guys on base, the ground ball would be exactly what they were looking for in that spot. Maybe you induce a double play, but it's hit too soft, or it's hit not at somebody, and over again, Palante would just end up getting hosed, and then I think he'd lose some confidence, and he'd give up some bombs. I'll check real quick. He gave up one home run on the season in the 10 innings that he pitched before going down to Memphis. But what I always thought was the case with Palante was you had to be lucky for it to work out, and you had to have good fielding on the infield for it to work out. To have him in that relief role, the utility knife of come in, get a double play ball. Because if you don't get the out or get the fielded ball or get the turn two, the 6-4-3, the 4-6-3, the 5-4-3, whatever you're looking for, if you don't get it, it's probably going to add fuel to whatever fire is currently ablaze in the game. Because you're basically saying we're bringing in a guy that's not going to really be able to strike you out most of the time. So we're conceding that the ball is going to be in play. Also, he has kind of an elevated walk rate. And he doesn't have anywhere to put the guy because he comes in with runners already on base. So for a guy that tends to walk more than the average bear, not an ideal situation to have him used in that role. So for Palante to say, yeah, I think I'm better when I have a chance to pitch longer and get into the flow of the game, get better as I go. And I think a lot of guys who throw a sinker are like that because you get a little more bite. You just get a little more crispness on that pitch as you go along in an outing, and you get a feel for it, and you really start to bury that pitch at the bottom of the zone or below the zone. And Palante is working for those ground balls. Throws a four-seamer that can get to 95, 96, but throws that sinker as well. And you just sometimes need to be a guy that can get integrated into an outing. The other part of it is he needs to be able to clean up his own messes rather than be asked to inherit somebody else's messes and clean those up. I think that's a better fit for the profile of pitcher that he is because of all of the things that I just mentioned. He walks guys. He allows contact. Like the guy that can be a fireman, yeah, you want like a Seth Maness to be able to get the ground ball and the double play ball, and that's kind of how they envision Palante. But to come in with multiple guys on base, you also want to just be able to blow guys away. You want to strike somebody out. And that's not as much part of Palante's skill set. I think it can be because he throws mid-90s. It's not that he doesn't throw hard. He can throw hard. But it's just the style of pitcher that he is. He pitches to contact and does it effectively with a good defense behind him. But that, I think, is going to play out over 5 innings more favorably than it is you just isolate, take your shot in a one inning, maybe even a one batter scenario where they say, hey, monkey, do your trick. Get us your double play that you always seem to be able to get. And sometimes he can, but when he doesn't, what does everybody react like? Oh, Palante again. He sucks. This guy can't do it. I think he's better suited to a starter role, which is why it's not crazy that the Cardinals brought him up. It's why I sort of anticipated and said, look, guys, Palante could be the answer here. And honestly, I don't think it's a terrible idea. When I did the podcast with Josh Jacobs talking about a potential 2025 if the Cardinals decided to sort of sell off at this deadline if they were out of the race, which now it doesn't look like they're going to be, back at 500, tied for second, they're full speed ahead trying to win in 2024, as well they should be. They've turned this ship around, 12-3 in their last 15. They were 9 games under, bam. Now you wake up two and a half weeks later, and they're at 500. But the reason I mentioned in that podcast of, in a world where 2025 has a reduced payroll, Andre Pallante could be a really interesting number 5 starter because he's going to give you 5-6 innings every time he pitches, and sometimes he's going to get beat to hell if the BABIP isn't on his side that day. But he's going to throw 150 innings probably over 30 starts, and he's going to probably have a 4.5, a 5 ERA. Like, not sexy. I keep saying not sexy, but in a world where you just need a guy to go eat it for 30 starts, Palante's your guy. And he's going to compete his ass off because he is one of the most competitive guys on the Cardinals. I don't know if he looks it. I don't know if people understand that about him. Andre Pallante is one of the most competitive players on the St. Louis Cardinals. I truly believe that, having seen him, having watched him in spring training, having watched behind the scenes, being in the clubhouse after a game that doesn't go well and how he reacts, you can just tell it burns him up. He is as competitive as anybody on this team. I don't know if people get that, but you could do a lot worse than Andre Pallante going out there as your number 5 starter. It went pretty well in 2022 when he did it. He had like a 3.9 ERA in the rotation for 10 starts. They moved him to the bullpen. He ended up pitching even a little bit better there. I think Palante could be serviceable at worst. And today we saw a lot better than serviceable from Palante. Is it something, though, that can continue? Well, I think to understand and ascertain the answer to that, you have to consider why he was successful in AAA with a 2.2 ERA, despite walking all the guys that he did. Why he was successful today, allowing just 3 hits and managing to be competitive against righties as well as lefties. He is a right-handed pitcher, but he's always had reverse splits with the sinker and the way his four-seam fastball kind of cuts and runs in on the hands of a lefty. It explains why he's got reverse splits. But to develop a pitch that can get righties out too, or that can take righties off their element, that's something that he was further able to do during this stint in Memphis, where he was down there working on a 2-seam fastball. You heard Palante in the quote in the audio I played courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest talking about the second fastball that he worked on. Well, that's what it was. It was a 2-seamer, as he describes here.
That 2-seamer, right?
Yeah.
Right-handers from diving in.
Yeah. That's been the purpose of the pitch, and that's been something that had been kind of been the death of me up here the last couple of years, last year or so. So being able to do that has changed the game.
So it stands to reason he develops this 2-seam fastball because it's not life or death every time they bring him into a game because of the fireman role that he was basically asked to fulfill. It wasn't successful when he was doing it. Now he's going to go down where he can stretch out, he can get into the flow of the game a little bit better and work on stuff. We always say, guys go down to AAA and they're going to work on this, or in spring training they're working on their pitches, so don't look at the results. This is a bona fide example of how that actually can be true at times. It's not just a trope. It's not just something people say because they're embarrassed when their stats aren't good. It's actually what these professionals are doing. Andre Pallante went down, he refined a 2-seamer and used it at times today to be effective and kind of brush righties back and get in on their hands, and you can jam them. You can maybe elicit a swing and miss. There's a lot you can do with that pitch. And if that's a sharper weapon for him now, I think that's something that could allow him to sustain success up here. I really do. Now, does it mean he's going to throw 6 shutout innings every time he pitches? No. But what did I say before this start even happened? If he goes 5 innings, 3 runs, he's done his job. He's a number 5 starter. He doesn't need to do much more than that. Again, if you went 5-3 every game, your ERA would be kind of ugly. It'd be around 5. But it would also, if you were consistent with the 5-3, and you weren't arriving at a 5 ERA by sometimes going 3 innings and giving up 5, and then going 5 innings and giving up 1, like I guess that would work too. The day you went 5-1, you gave your team a chance to win. But if you're going 5-3 every time, that's going to be enough as the number 5 in a rotation. And he by far exceeded those expectations today with what he was able to accomplish. We'll talk about Ollie Marmol keeping him in past 5 innings to begin with. Very interesting bullpen management. I didn't tease it off the top of the show, but a lot of intrigue to the way that this game was handled today. And I'm curious to see what Cardinals fans think about it. But before I get into that topic, I want to play a little audio from Ollie Marmol, Cardinals manager, talking about Palante's outing. This audio courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest.
Man, Palante did a really nice job to come in, let me back up, to go down and become a starter and start working on some of the things that he wanted to work on, that 2-seamer into righties, and then come up here and have an outing like that was impressive. He did, everything we needed him to do. He ran that sinker in on a couple of those righties. His fastball has that natural cut that plays well, mixing the slider and the curveball. So overall, did a phenomenal job. A lot of weak contact, but dominated that outing.
So I look at this situation and say Palante exceeded expectations today, but he also thrived in the exact way that you would have envisioned it could work. By, walking a few guys, he walked 3, but erasing guys on double play balls. He had 2 double plays. That's a hallmark of his game. It's going to continue to be. And if he can neutralize righties a little bit, that gives him a really good chance to thrive. Because he had a 1,200, or let me phrase this again, righties against him had a 1,200 OPS at the beginning of the season when he was here for the first few weeks of the year against Andre Pallante. Lefties had a 529 OPS. So it's clearly you got to isolate and say, what do I do against righties to be able to get them out? And the answer was develop the two-seamer, be able to throw it against right-handed batters. If he can do that more consistently, I think he's going to be somebody with some staying power here in the big leagues. And he also, we saw in the offseason, he's working on the death ball, the curve ball, the knuckle curve. I'm not sure if the knuckle curve that he broke out today is exactly the same as the death ball that we saw with Jordan Montgomery last year, was written about a lot in the playoffs, and is something that Andre Pallante, I know, was working on. But the curveball that he threw to freeze the batter for out number 2 in the 6th inning, I think it was Jeimer Candelario, and then he got Jake Fraley to pop up to end the inning. Really good pitch, that curveball. So he's able to mix in something like that every now and again. Decent pitch mix. I do think he works well as a starter, and he could be a guy that goes 5 or 6 and has an ERA in the 4s, and that's not going to blow anybody away, but that's going to stabilize the darn thing, and that's really all the Cardinals need out of that 5 spot. I think that's the mentality they came into the day with, and then it's very interesting to see what happens as things shift, and he goes 5 innings with only 66 on his pitch count, and Ole Marmol says, all right, go out there and get the 6th, but then he allows a couple of base hits. Elly De La Cruz, he faces him, which that is a lefty, so it is to the benefit of Palante. So you're not necessarily looking to bring in your top lefty relief option to put out the fire. Palante's a fine option to have in there. But once the hit to De La Cruz happened, I was starting to get a little surprised that they were still sticking with Palante. Not because of pitch count, necessarily. I think he finished in the 80s or so. But that inning was getting a little long on him, and the balls were starting to find holes. And what can tend to happen against Palante when things do go off the rails is blue pit, grounder through the hole, 3-run homer. And then suddenly you go, damn, where did that lead go? And it felt like that was maybe about to happen to Palante. All the credit in the world to him for battling in there, getting the K looking, the check swing went around, so technically not looking, and then popping out Jake Fraley to end the inning. Incredible. I mean, the Cardinals needed it, right? Like, they need all these wins. They needed to desperately get back to 500 as quickly as possible, and they did it over the course of 15 games after being at the season low mark of 9 under, 9 games below 500. So just an excellent job by Palante. Credit to Ole Marmol for seeing him through that. I'm not often questioning Marmol, but when I do, I'm not going to second guess and say, oh, they should have done this. I'll tell you in the moment, or at least tweet, if I'm watching it and locked in on it, which if I'm not locked in on it, I shouldn't be second guessing what's going on in the moment. But I said, interesting to watch this unfold. I feel like I understand what Ole's trying to do coming up on a grueling stretch of a schedule in June. This was my tweet from today. But also, there's an off day tomorrow, and Palante has done his job already. So this is an interesting stretch of game to be watching unfold. Which was like the nice way of saying, I'm not sure Palante, okay, let's see. Let's see. Because look, if you're not calling your shot in the moment, and you're not saying, I don't know about this part in the moment, then don't turn around later and say, oh, Ole Marmol blew it. No, I mean, if Ole Marmol brought the right pitcher in or had the right pitcher left in and you didn't mind it in the moment, the fact that it goes against him later on doesn't mean that he was wrong. It means that the pitcher didn't execute, and sometimes it's baseball. Right? So I was kind of going, I don't know, man. Palante's done his job. Wouldn't you like to just be able to feel good about where he's at? You haven't used your triumvirate. You haven't used JoJo, Kittredge, Helsley since the weekend against the Cubs. They've had 2 days off. Wouldn't this be an opportunity to just kind of get your lefty Liberatore or get John King in there, whatever it needs to be, to face off against the particular batters, and then let the triumvirate handle the rest of this game, 7, 8, 9, with a 3-run lead? Isn't that the way to do it? They found a way to get Andre Pallante through the 6th inning. He deserves the credit. To me, Ole Marmol deserves the credit. But then the way he handled the bullpen after that. Let's kind of move on from Palante. We talked a lot about him. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on Palante's start, on the viability for him as a number 5. I think, again, I saw comments. I remember people saying, no, it's a terrible idea. We're talking about Palante, Andre Pallante. I'm like, no, I know. I think he can do more than y'all give him credit for sometimes. And he looked really good out there today. Let me know in the comments if you agree with that sentiment. 4 strikeouts, 3 hits allowed, 3 walks allowed, but didn't give up any runs. Lowered his ERA, too, down from 6.30 because of the rough start in April that he had to 3.94. Lowered it more than 2 runs. Obviously, he hadn't thrown that many innings, so that's why. 6 scoreless. But let's talk about the 7th inning. And I'll get into some little tidbits. I made notes during the game. I'll try to be doing this more often to talk about some different other elements that were moments that can otherwise be forgotten, but if I have a thought on it, I want to put it out there. Kyle Leahy is the guy that Ollie Marmol goes to in the 7th. You're thinking, okay, 7, 8, 9. You can go Kittredge if it's righties that makes sense to face. If it's JoJo's turn because the lefties are up, all right, he can have the 8th, whatever, vice versa. Helsley's going to get the 9th. Again, coming into Wednesday, a full week, all 3 of the triumvirate had only pitched 2 of the 7 days. And for all 3 of them, it was Saturday, Sunday, the weekend series against the Cubs. Right? Didn't pitch the couple days before that, had the off day, had the game on Wednesday against the Orioles. They weren't used. And then coming up in the early portion of this Red series, they weren't used. So the guys that you're worried about being overworked had already gotten that rest. But it's Leahy that we see first. And I don't think post-game, Ollie was asked about whether JoJo was available or not. I hope he was. But we didn't see him either. When it came time to have a left-handed pitcher rescue Leahy, who didn't have his best stuff, recorded 1 out but gave up a couple of hits, eventually a run coming around to score, charged to him. But John King gives him out of the rest of that inning. 2/3 of an inning, struck one of his batters out. He's got a 1.65 ERA. John King doing a great job. But you'd have also thought, wouldn't JoJo be the lefty to come to the rescue if you really need it in the 7th inning? That would be his spot. Didn't use him. And then they do go Kittredge, Helsley, both of which allowed a run. Kittredge, a couple of hits allowed, 1 run scores. Helsley, 1 hit allowed, but walked a couple of batters and a run scored against him. The ERA for Ryan Helsley up down to 2.52. He's been getting battered a bit in the last few games that he's pitched. But interesting that we didn't see that just normal alignment of the bullpen. Either something's going on with JoJo or they were just really trying to, ideally, they'd have saved them all, maybe. Leahy throws the 7th, King throws the 8th. I don't know if it's another plan for Fernandez in the 9th, or maybe you still use Helsley if it's a 3-run lead. Maybe you're hoping the offense adds on, so it's a larger lead. Personally, I thought they should have used Ryan Ludus. I think we talked about that yesterday. After a 7-1 lead on Tuesday for the 9th, they still haven't allowed the guy to pitch. He's on the roster, been here for like a week. Haven't used him. But that's maybe what I would have done to allow a Fernandez to be available for today's opportunity if you were trying to stay away from the triumvirate. But interesting there, I was just a little bit surprised. Like, yes, I get that you want to keep him fresh. Yes, if you look at the upcoming schedule for June, it's brutal. They're off on Thursday. They're off as you're listening to this on May the 30th. But then June begins in earnest, and the Cardinals don't have but 2 off days all the month of June, and one of them is the day after the Birmingham game, which my credentials just came through for today, by the way. So I will be trekking down to Birmingham to cover that fun event, special event down there against the San Francisco Giants on June 20th. So that's kind of like not even a real travel day because that's going to be a little bit different, a little bit more bizarre. So they're going to need that day of rest. 2 off days in all of June, and then they're off on my birthday, July 1. So I understand if you're Ollie Marmol trying to give these guys as much of a mini vacay as possible because you know that Kittredge, Helsley, Romero, they're going to be ridden pretty hard over the next month or so. But let me know what you thought of that. I thought that was an interesting alignment in the fact that we saw Leahy in the 7th in a 3-0 game, which I think also speaks to a couple of things. It speaks to more faith right now in Leahy than you had before, more faith in John King right now than you had before, and more faith in the offense to be able to add on. We haven't talked at all yet about the Cardinal offense in this game. Matt Carpenter hits his first home run as a Cardinal since April of 2021, got the scoring started for St. Louis. They were able to add on. Nolan Gorman doubles. We're starting to see a much better version of him. Masyn Winn had a big day going 3 for 4. He drives in another run there in the 4th inning, made it 3-0 Cardinals, and you're feeling pretty good about life. But then they get one off of that 7th inning, Leahy and John King, where you're really just trying to squeeze a scoreless frame out of it and rest one of your other relievers that are more primary to the back end of your bullpen. Again, I'm still not convinced that JoJo's good. maybe it's literally just nothing. I just didn't see anything about Ollie talking about it after the game. So hopefully everything is fine, and they just decided we're going to get him an extra day because they've ridden him hard, and they're going into Philly this weekend, his former team. So they figure he's going to be a prominent guy in that series. Who knows? But then here was what happened that is so important to how the Cardinals were able to do this on Wednesday. Nolan Gorman gets him one back, home run in the 8th inning, 4-1. All right, you have some issues there in the bottom of the 8th inning. Candelario doubles. De La Cruz is able to score because of a throwing error by Dylan Carlson. Up and down, just an awful play by Dylan Carlson. He had come into the game, which is going to bring me back to having to talk about Lars Nootbaar now, as I alluded. Dylan enters the game for that inning because Lars Nootbaar leaves it due to injury. Now, Nootbaar got thrown out on the bases like a nincompoop earlier in the game. I think it was the same inning that Masyn Winn was caught stealing, which they replay reviewed. They upheld the call. Masyn Winn was safe, in my opinion, on that replay. Replay, though, is clearly only there to fix egregious errors that you can just see right away. It's not to get the ones that are close plays as correct as possible. Because if it were, Masyn Winn would have been ruled safe. But they always kind of catered to the call on the field, which was out. And I think pretty clearly he had a really nice slide to evade the Ella De La Cruz tag, but was ruled out. But then Nootbaar, it was just inexcusable. It's runners on first and second. He gets backpicked at first. I get that mistakes happen in baseball, but when we see them from this team, we do got to keep these moments in mind. We want to assert that, this is a crisp team. They play good baseball the right way. Sometimes they don't, and this was a moment where Lars Nootbaar didn't. There's just not ever an excuse for that if you're doing your job because there's nowhere for you to be. Runners on first and second, you're backpicked at first. Goldie in the batter's box, he's been swinging a hot bat, hitting more home runs recently. That could be a game-changing moment to take the bat out of his hands. You just never know the way that could have played out. Really bad. There's nowhere for Nootbaar to have been. The one thing I will say is if that was already the beginnings of an injury and he tweaked it on that play, maybe that happens and that's an explanation for it because your quick jerk motion back to first and maybe it's where he kind of got his side messed up on him. That's the injury for Lars Nootbaar. Something to do with his side. I think it's on the left side, and it looked in the replay that I saw a little bit oblique, which is a little concerning. I'm not convinced that Lars Nootbaar's good. He stayed in the game. It was a replay that Bally showed on his last at-bat of the day where he sort of checked his swing and grimaced a little after it, but then ended up getting to first base anyway. And there was just a moment where running down the line, it just didn't look like exactly what it should have been. Ollie Marmol comes out, Trainer comes out. They allow him to stay in the game, but then he's replaced for defense the next inning. I don't know. We'll see. The ruling that I'm seeing, the report that I'm seeing, I'll find it because John Denton had it. MLB.com. This is Cardinals manager Ollie Marmol on the side injury suffered by Lars Nootbaar, who stayed in the game but later exited. Quote, he kind of felt something on his side, so I don't want to play him through it. I don't want him to play through it. We took him out and put Carlson in, and we'll take another look at it shortly. So that's basically nothing being said there by the manager. But Denton in another tweet also said that Nootbaar is headed for an MRI in Philly. So that would be the concern, is the MRI. Speaking of MRIs, I feel like I mentioned this yesterday. Keynan Middleton, kind of worried that he might be cooked. It seems like, injury-wise, it seems like not responding physically the way that they wanted after the rehab assignment with Springfield. He got another MRI. I think they're in the second opinion territory, and it could be like a Tommy John type of situation for Keynan, which stinks because to get him back for the bullpen would have been great. And, they signed him to only a one-year contract, if I'm not mistaken. So he may never pitch for the Cardinals, despite being a guy that I thought would have been great for the bullpen, great for the clubhouse, but that kind of is what it is at this point. So legit concern, I'd say DEFCON 1, full-blown panic when it comes to Keynan Middleton. I'm prepared to say that already. I think it's going to be bad news. Lars Nootbaar, I'm a DEFCON 2. This is not a nothing to me. And keep in mind, the DEFCON scale, it's not DEFCON 5. That's not the bad one. That's the everything's good. DEFCON 1, the really, really bad one, nuclear war. DEFCON 2 is the second worst that it can be. The reason I am so alarmed about Nootbaar's is because it looks oblique, and that's just a crummy injury to have if it is what it ends up being, because it leaves you out for an indeterminate amount of time. Could be 3 weeks, could be 6, could be 10. Like, it just depends on the severity and depends on it's just a wonky rehab and recovery because you got to take it slow. So the annoyance of it, I raised the DEFCON level because of that, because of the importance of the player. Like, when Lars Nootbaar started to put it together, that's about when the Cardinals started to put it together as a team. He was injured. He came back after a few weeks in early to mid-April, but struggled like heck for a while. But then you started to see about that, trying to look back at the game logs now, about that portion in early May, he started to turn the corner a little bit. A couple of home runs in consecutive games one against the Mets, one against Milwaukee. And the Cardinals obviously were in the middle of that losing streak still. But that's when he had 3 walks in a game. A few days later, he had 2 walks, was getting on base all the time, driving in runs. When he began to turn the corner, not long after that, the Cardinals were close behind him. So the importance of Nootbaar to the team is a reason that I have the DEFCON pretty high for a potential injury for him. And the fact that unless Denton misfired and he's not getting an MRI, like, to me, the way that Ollie Marmol answered the question in the quote that he gave, and I read it just a moment ago, kind of felt something in his side, so I didn't want him to play through it. We took him out and put Carlson in, and we'll take another look at it shortly. Yeah, all of those things are true, but it doesn't alleviate any concern. That's concerning because of the injury that it is. If it was an ankle, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. He'll probably get him off Thursday, and he'll be fine to go by Friday or later in the weekend. Because it looked oblique to me. Side is what they said. I don't know if that's oblique, if it's intercostal, what we're talking about. I would be a little bit concerned about Lars Nootbaar at this point. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. But the reason I was parlayed into that conversation, because I am so stream of consciousness on the show, I was mentioning that Dylan Carlson, the play there in the 8th inning, first it was Alec Burleson that was in left, base hit to him, and he kind of bobbled the ball around, and De La Cruz did not advance to second on that. But then the hit to right that I think was a double, Carlson bobbled it in right field, didn't field it very cleanly. And then the throw, it's like he didn't even grip the ball and just threw it like 25 feet to Gorman and was short hop Gorman. So then he had to struggle to pick it up. And that was when De La Cruz was able to take the extra base and score. And ultimately the ruling was changed to an E9 on Dylan, which it absolutely should have been. He's not looked good defensively. I'll keep kind of bringing it up when I see it, but it's disappointing that he looked so good toward the end of spring training, had that collision with Jordan Walker, and he has looked out of his element ever since. And the numbers of the plate are pretty brutal as well. So I do think if you have an injury to Nootbaar that puts him on the IL, you bring Jordan Walker back and you place him in right field every day. I don't think Dylan is an everyday answer in the outfield right now. He can spell Siani in center. He can play occasionally in right field. I understand that it's a difficult spot to be in, because last year it was the opposite. I said, look, if he's struggling, give him some time, play him every day, let him have his opportunities. I don't know that right now the Cardinals can afford to do that because he doesn't look confident. And how do you give a guy confidence who's playing poorly? Do you reinforce it by saying, hey, we've got your back, we'll play you? If you do that, is it going to be enough? A confident Dylan is a really good baseball player, but right now I don't think he has that. So I don't really know what the right answer is. That's a tough thing. Ollie Marmol maybe find a way to put his finger on the pulse of that situation, because really, as much as Siani has been a nice player for the Cardinals, his numbers offensively are not good enough to play every day. So it would be nice if somebody else would step up, and Dylan is the obvious candidate to be that right now with other guys that are injured. But it is the situation that it is. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Hopefully the answer is that Nootbaar's not hurt. But like I said, it's possible that he is. All right, let's continue to roll and talk about, I guess, the topic of the offense that I hadn't really gotten fully into yet. Just being able to continue adding on later in the game. That 8th inning happens. Now it's 4-2, and suddenly it's just a little bit too close for comfort. But they score another run in the 9th inning. You take any runs the way you can get them. Alec Burleson had an RBI walk with the bases loaded. But to be able to load the bases in the first place was a nice job done. And things are looking up because now the Cardinals have a 3-run lead and their closer coming in. But then let's talk about Ryan Helsley before we get out of here on the show. Struggling recently. I know I may have already talked about him a little bit, but I want to dive into this a little bit more. I'm going to pull up his game logs from over the weekend because against the Cubs, it was sort of the same scenario. Gave up 2 runs on the 25th of May. That was Saturday. Gave up a run on Sunday. Inning pitched both times. 4 hits in the first game, 2 runs allowed. 3 hits in the second game, 1 run allowed. A home run given up. That was the way he gave up that run in the game on Sunday night. And for Helsley, I think it's the same conversation that we've been having. Lack of confidence in the fastball really seems to be the way that this is going for him. He did throw 8 or 9 fastballs today. I don't know that that was even quite 50% of the pitches that he threw overall. Guess I can look that up in the box score. See if I can find it here. Ryan Helsley threw 21 pitches, only 9 of them for strikes in this game, and I think 9 was also maybe the number of 4-seamers that he threw. 9 or 10, so a little less than half. And velo-wise, I mean, 97, 99, 98, 100, 100, 100, 98, 100, 99. So the velo was okay. Location was not strong. And when he did throw a strike, it tended to get hit. I'll run you through all of the 4-seamers he threw just for comparison's sake as to what to expect. 4-seam fastball to Nick Martini. That was a hit. In play, no out. Ball to India. A called strike to, I can't say this guy's name, Herdubis. I give up. Jacob Herdubis. Herdubisi. I completely am not even going to try. I've never heard of him in my life. So 1 called strike, and then a ball, and then in play runs. Looking at this on StatCast. Ball, foul, ball, and that was it for the 4-seamers. So most of them were thrown out of the strike zone. The ones that weren't were generally successful with base hits or in-play runs. And that's sort of been the story of his fastball. The pitch that can muscle it up to 103 at times. We're not quite seeing that velo. He's still hitting 100 on a number of them. Still had the 5 fastest pitches thrown in the game. We know that that's what he's capable of doing. But the confidence in the pitches doesn't seem to be there. I don't know what for the season his number of fastballs thrown is relative to the rest of his pitches, but 10 for 21 seems a little bit low, and I think it may be a lack of confidence. Was he tipping that pitch over the weekend against the Cubs? Maybe, but you'd think that even if he was, by now it's not something that's still a concern. Like they should have been able to pick up on that and address it. But maybe it can be addressed, but until you get back out there again and say, all right, I'm lacking some confidence in this pitch because I was being told I was tipping it the last time. Now to get back out there, and you don't want to try too hard to make sure you're not tipping, because then you're overthinking and you're either throwing the ball wildly out of the zone or you're putting up a meatball, because even 100, if it's middle, can be turned around by big league hitters. So concern level for Ryan Helsley right now, I would put that at a DEFCON 3. Feeling great about life is a DEFCON 5. No concern whatsoever. Maybe 3 is a little bit too high. Between 3 or 4, 3.5. 3 might be relevant. I mean, this is 3 outings in a row where he's given up runs. The good thing about it is he's human. All pitchers are human, and they're going to go through struggles one time or another. But for the Cardinals to be able to win all 3 games and for him to complete all 3 saves when that happens is pretty remarkable. It's very fortunate that they had a big enough lead in each case that it was able to happen that way. But a lot of times when your closer hits that wall, and it happens all the time, we see closers, I'm not going to say flame out, but have moments in time where they are not as sharp, and you have to figure out why that is and get them back as quick as you can. We see it throughout baseball. Usually it ends in a walk-off home run that you lose the game. For Helsley to get all 3 of those saves the last 3 times he's pitched, when he's clearly not feeling the fastball right now, is good news. So we'll see if he's able to the next time he pitches. Obviously Thursday, the day off, and they'll hopefully need him over the weekend playing the Phillies. Maybe the best team in baseball, if not one of the top couple. Hopefully they have that lead late where they're looking to turn to Ryan Helsley. But we'll see how he fares in those situations moving forward. But I think that's about everything that I had to touch on. I forgot to mention, the one thing I did forget to mention is Masyn Winn's hitting streak extended to 18 games. Passes Albert Pujols and Jordan Walker, who had both accumulated 17-game hit streaks. I think, did Walker do it twice in the same year last year? Something weird like that? Maybe that's not 100% right. But either way, 18 now for Winn. He is 7 short of the all-time Cardinal rookie record, which is Joe McEwing. Joe McEwing, who is currently still an advisor, I think, to John Mozeliak after he was the bench coach last year. 25 games, so that's what Masyn Winn is chasing down. He's been really, really good offensively. Like we said, Nolan Gorman has turned the corner a little bit, it feels like. Had the double, RBI double, and the home run as well today. He's up to a 759 OPS. His OPS is higher than Burleson, who went over again but did reach base via walk, had the RBI walk with the bases loaded. So, like, Nolan Gorman is the first Cardinal to reach 10 home runs. Like, that's a thing that happened today. He's on pace to hit 30 because they're a third of the way through the season, and he got his 10th in game number 54. So good to see. Definitely good to see Matt Carpenter having the home run. Drew a walk as well. His OPS is at 718. Masyn Winn is knocking on the door of 800. He's up to 798 with a 308 batting average. Just great numbers from him. Nootbaar went 2 for 4. Donovan 3 for 4. So we got the OPS up above 700 to 708. We'll see with Nootbaar. 741 is the OPS. Pretty solid. But is he going to be out on the shelf maybe for a little bit? The hope is that he's not, because he's been playing too darn well. Really like the alignment where you have him in the 2-hole, whether it's Donovan leading off, Winn leading off, and Donovan down at number 9. They tried that earlier this week, and it worked really nicely. Cardinal offense, it's looking good. I mean, if you look the last 30 days, I know this is maybe a little bit of a arbitrary endpoint, whatever, but really it's not, because we know how much the team was struggling at the beginning of the month of May. But for the last 30 days, the Cardinals have a top 5 OPS in baseball. Top 5 in baseball. I lied. They're 6th. They were top 5 earlier today when I did the big show on KTGR, and now the Dodgers passed them, or somebody passed them, because they're 731. That's 6th, though, in baseball over the past 30 days. And if you isolate it to the past 15 days, Yankees are number 1 in baseball, Royals are number 2, Cardinals are number 3 over the past half a month. So the Cardinals are in a spot, and over the past week, past 7 days, 2nd in baseball behind the Blue Jays, 806 OPS. The more weeks the Cardinals put together like this, eventually they're just going to be that offense again, and we'll be able to say total aberration what happened at the beginning of the year. Didn't end up firing anybody, didn't end up having any major personnel changes. If anything, they got worse because their one good hitter was Wilson Contreras, and then he got injured. Maybe that got everybody else to just realize, hey, nobody's coming through that door. It's going to have to be us that do it. And for right now, they're doing it. So I don't know. How many more weeks do they have to string this together before you say, actually, the Cardinals are a top 10 offense? I don't care that overall right now they're still mired around 19th in average or 21st in OPS or whatever it is. I'm not going to look it up because I'm tired. But those numbers are incorporating what they did at the beginning of the year, which was putrid. And they've never been average. Like, they were terrible, and now they're great. And if they're great for another month, and then another month after that, suddenly they're just going to end up being a top 10, top 12 offense, and that could end up being more than good enough. Cardinals back to 500. Let me know in the comments below how you're feeling about it. This episode ended up being way longer than I anticipated it, way longer than I wanted it to be, but I'm done with it now. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening. Check out the YouTube memberships in the description below if you're interested in supporting me in that way. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. We'll talk to you next time on Be Safe Daily. Peace.